this is Isabel Litzler. So welcome to my channel for those of you who are just discovering, and for the ones that are listening regularly or viewing regularly. I want to thank you for my work and basically watching my channel. It's really appreciated. So today I wanted to basically talk about what makes a good interview, because I was in the Human Resources Forum in Geneva. A lot of local recruiters from Switzerland talked about what makes a good interview. So I thought you'd be very interested to know how to have a good interview in Switzerland, especially those of you who are actively looking for a job in Switzerland. So basically there's three different tips I want to give you. This is part of what I do, giving you 3 tips in my videos. So I basically took all the conversations that happened during this 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, and tried to regroup this and give you basically the output. You know, what was the big insight and what's important. So tip number 1, I would say, is that basically there's no one criteria for making a good interview. A lot of talks were about the interview itself and the questions, and everyone agreed that it's a little bit uptight. So what makes a good interview is basically having different criteria. It's having an interview, but maybe also having an assessment, meeting different people. So the multiplicity, and this is something that we all agreed on, multiplicity of rating is very important. Because it gives you also a little bit of 360. You're not just, it's just not you and the candidate during an interview. And we all know sometimes those are a little bit flawed, either from the recruiter trying to project maybe some things, or maybe from the candidate repeating something learned by heart. So we agreed that the interview is a little bit of a superficial process, but by adding different criteria like assessments and other things, we try to make it a little bit more flexible, basically. So that's number 1, is multiple criteria makes a good interview. So if you have those, if you have interviews with different things like interviews and meeting different people and assessments, and you might find that it's a little bit heavy, but my recommendation would be go through the whole process until the end. So if you're asked about doing an assessment, you know it's a little bit of a difficulty, or it takes you a little bit of time. My recommendation is do what you're told. That's what I say in my training. In Switzerland, they prefer, or they will favor, candidates that are a little bit behaved, I would say. So the candidates that will go with the processes, and sometimes they can be a little bit long and a little bit tight for candidates, but they will really favor that. Again, if you find that the process is a little bit too much for you, maybe that's a sign this is not the right type of company for you. So it's part of the evaluation, goes both ends, you know. But if you want the job, I would say do what you're told, you know, give what you're asked during the process of application online and during the interview. So that's number 1. Number 2, what makes a good interview is also to have maybe those non-typical interviews. So we talked a lot about the straightforward, classical questions. Tell me about a time when you did something, trying to get examples. And this is all actually reassuring for the recruiter, because then you think, oh, he gave me examples, or she gave me a time when she did something. It's all to reassure us that the candidate is not lying, basically. But in the end, we agreed that some of the best experiences, and I actually shared one myself, where the experiences where the interviews were a little bit different. So maybe we met in a cafe somewhere and discussed with the recruiter, or we were talking about during a lunch, or something a little bit less formal, so that the candidate can be a little bit more spontaneous, and so does the recruiter. So we encourage, some of us during the conversation, we really encourage those kinds of interviews. We find that they're a little bit more natural, that it's better to make a decision on both ends on whether we want to work together. And it just makes it a little more human, I think, than having those very standardized type of interviews. So that's what came out of the conversation, is try to make your recruitment process, whether you're recruiting or you're a candidate, try to make the process as natural as possible. And number 3, what came out of the discussion was that you need to adapt to the situation when you're recruiting somebody. So it's not just interviews. Maybe at some point you realize you need to find this very difficult profile, and you need to use sourcing. And then you have people that are specialized in that, you know, trying to headhunt people online. So what it means for you as a candidate is try to be visible online. Again, My training goes in depth on profiling yourself, branding yourself, because when a recruiter is looking for someone a little bit different and they're not finding via typical job boards, and they need to source the candidates by doing keywords online, etc., going on LinkedIn, if your resume or your profile is not adapted to, for example, a keyword search, people will not find you. So you need to have those keywords in your resume, online, in your profile on LinkedIn, so that when people type, marketing specialist, etc., they find you. So again, this is something that you can view in my training, where I explain how to write your resume and make it also keyword efficient, etc. So this is going to help with visibility for you to be found by recruiters. So again, the three main things that came out of the conversation: what makes you a good candidate and what makes the interview process interesting. First of all, you want to make sure that you use multiple ratings. So you interview, but maybe you also have a test, maybe you also meet different people. Secondly, you need to make the interview itself as relaxed as possible, and maybe avoiding the standard interview, very cold, or asking the same questions. Maybe go in a different space than an interview room or something like that. And number three is you have to be aware as a candidate that sometimes searches are not done online via job board. So make sure that your resume is keyword efficient and that you can be found easily. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, as usual, feel free to post below.